If you've been on your path for years, you've probably had experiences that felt absolutely real. Moments in meditation or yoga or your practice where the mind went completely quiet. Retreats where something opened that had never opened before, or glimpses of stillness so complete you thought everything had finally shifted. And these weren't imagined, they were genuine. Something true was touched. But then they faded. So the peace that felt permanent during retreat dissolved back into familiar patterns within days or weeks. And the stillness that seemed so absolute became elusive the moment daily life resumed. And that awakening that felt like a fundamental shift quietly collapsed back into the same cycles, the same thoughts, the same tensions in the body, the subtle vigilance that is always there. And this is deeply confusing because the experiences themselves were authentic. Something real happened. So why didn't they stay? And most people conclude that they need more practice, a different technique, a deeper teaching, the right teacher this time. And so they continue cycling through methods, through frameworks, through sincere attempts to recreate or deepen what they've glimpsed. But what if the issue isn't the quality of the experience? What if what's being missed exists at a completely different level than where most practices operate? And here's perhaps the distinction most people never make, and that there's a difference between experiencing something and having the foundational structure reorganize to hold it permanently. And these are not the same thing. And when you sit in meditation and the mind becomes quiet, when you attend that retreat and touch profound stillness, or when you work with a practice and something opens, these are experiences arising within your current structure. So your body, your nervous system, your energetic system, the field around you, all of these continue operating according to the patterns you've held for years, sometimes decades, probably your whole life. The experience occurs. It's real, it's valuable, but it's happening within a structure that hasn't fundamentally changed. And this is why it doesn't last, because the moment the conditions that created the experience shift, so you leave the retreat, the practice ends, your daily life resumes with its demands, your system returns to its foundational patterns. And like I said, it's not because the experience wasn't real or that you weren't good enough, but because the structure beneath the experience was never reorganized. So let me explain about what I mean by structure. Your body has learned particular ways of holding itself, subtle patterns of tension and preparation and bracing that have been conditioned over your entire lifetime. And these patterns exist beneath conscious awareness. They shape how you meet each moment before you're even aware a moment is occurring. And so your nervous system has organized itself around specific responses to safety and threat in each moment. And it's developed intricate patterns of scanning and vigilance and subtle preparation for what might come next. And even in people who've practiced meditation for years, these patterns often remain fundamentally intact. And your energetic system and the field that exists through and around you holds contractions that were formed in response to your encounters with the world. And some of these contractions have been in place your whole life. They determine how open you can actually be, how deeply stillness can penetrate, and how completely peace can actually settle within you. And these structures don't actually change through insight alone. You can have a profound realization about the nature of reality, and your system will still operate according to the constrictions and patterns it learned years ago. You can touch absolute stillness in meditation, and your body will still organize around subtle preparation the moment you open your eyes or you stand up. And you can experience genuine awakening, and the energetic field will still contract around the same protection patterns it's held since you were young. And this is why people who've had genuine spiritual experiences, the real ones, not imagined, find themselves still caught in familiar patterns. And they cycle through the same fatigue. The body still carries the same subtle tensions, and the nervous system still maintains its faithful scanning and contraction, and the field and energetic system still holds contractions and restrictions around the same old protections. And like I said, the experiences were totally authentic, but they occurred within a structural framework that didn't reorganize. And then the mind tries to work with this. It builds elaborate frameworks. It catalogs what works and what doesn't. It creates these sophisticated practices around maintaining present, around deepening stillness, and around integrating insights into daily life. And the mind can do all of this with great precision and real, genuine understanding. But the mind exists in a realm entirely separate from where these foundational structures operate. And understanding doesn't reorganize them. The mind can recognize stillness. It can appreciate presence. It can understand exactly why experience fade. But peace flows in dimensions that mental understanding cannot access. Stillness exists at levels that the thinking mind will never ever reach. And so structural reorganization happens through mechanisms that insight alone cannot touch. And this is the threshold where so many people find themselves. And it has nothing to do that their seeking has been misguided. And it's not because they haven't worked hard enough or found the right teaching, but it's because they've reached the edge of what experience-based approaches can actually provide. So people have been collecting glimpses, they've been building maps, they've been cycling through practices that create these beautiful openings. But underneath it all, the foundational structure of their being, the body, the nervous system, the energetic system, the field, remains essentially unchanged. And so the body still organizes around subtle preparation rather than rest. And the nervous system will still scan rather than settle. And the energetic field still contracts around those familiar protections. And then consciousness continues to move through patterns that were formed. So what actually needs to happen for transformation to be permanent? The body itself must discover entirely new ways of organizing, and it cannot be through will or discipline, but patterns of being it's never known. And it can't be forced. It can't be pushed. The nervous system must reorganize at its fundamental level, not manage calm or practice stillness, but rest that is so complete it reshapes how the entire system responds to life. And the energetic system and field must be able to release contractions that have faithfully been held. And it can't be through processing emotions or releasing feelings, but actual dissolution of the energetic structures themselves. And then consciousness must reorient around an entirely different ground. And none of this happens through having more experiences or collecting more glimpses or deeper insights into why things are the way they are. The experiences revealed what's possible. The glimpses that you had showed what exists beyond ordinary awareness. And the insights cultivated a sensitivity to recognize when something deeper is calling. But they cannot create structural reorganization, because the structure we're talking about wasn't formed through conscious intention. It was conditioned through years of lived experience. It was shaped by how your system learned to organize around all your encounters with safety and threat and demand. It exists at levels that operate beneath conscious awareness, and so it cannot transform through conscious effort alone. And this is why profound realizations fade, why even genuine awakenings can quietly collapse back into familiar patterns. And like I said, it's not because they were untrue, but it's because the deeper structure wasn't ready to remain open. The experience was authentic, it was true, but it occurred within a framework that hadn't reorganized to accommodate and hold what was touched. You can have the most profound spiritual experience of your life and 3 weeks later find yourself cycling through the same patterns, the same tensions, the same subtle contractions you thought you'd move beyond. And until this distinction is understood, people continue cycling. And of course, they're sincere in their seeking, but they're working at a level that cannot create what they're actually looking for. So if you've been cycling through practices for years, touching real depth that fades, perhaps you now know why. You've been working with experiences while the structure that generates those experiences remained unchanged. So the whole system continues organizing around the same patterns. And no amount of insight into why this happens changes the fact that it's happening. And this is where most people are when they find themselves genuinely stuck. And it isn't because they haven't practiced enough, but it's because they've reached the edge of what working and focusing on experiences can actually provide. And recognizing this distinction, that experiences and structural change are different things, is itself really valuable. Because once you see it, you can begin asking different questions. Not, how do I have deeper experiences, but what actually creates structural change? And that question opens different doors.